Sometimes the smallest decision costs the most in the moment and changes everything in the end. On a chilly Tuesday evening in Columbus, Ohio, Emily Carter tightened her grip on the handle of a worn grocery bag as she stepped out of a discount supermarket with just enough food to get her and her 8-year-old daughter through the rest of the week. Every dollar mattered. Every purchase required a calculation. The milk in her bag had been chosen over a box of cereal her daughter liked. The loaf of bread had been bought instead of the fresh fruit Emily wanted to bring home. That was how life worked now. At 32 years old, Emily had become an expert at stretching money further than she ever thought possible. As a single mother working long shifts at a neighborhood diner, she lived from paycheck to paycheck, constantly balancing bills, rent, school expenses, and unexpected costs that always seemed to arrive at the worst possible time. That evening, her mind was crowded with worries. Rent was due in 4 days. Her checking account held less than $60. Her daughter's field trip permission slip sat on the kitchen counter waiting for a payment Emily wasn't sure she could afford. The parking lot lights flickered on as the sun dipped below the horizon. Emily adjusted her jacket and started toward her aging sedan parked near the far edge of the lot. Halfway there, something caught her eye. A dark leather wallet rested on the pavement beside a large black SUV. She slowed her pace. At first, she assumed someone would return for it, but after looking around and seeing no one nearby, she bent down and picked it up. The leather felt expensive, much more expensive than anything she owned. Her pulse quickened slightly. She glanced around once more before carefully opening it. The moment she looked inside, she froze. Neatly stacked $100 bills filled one compartment. There were far more than she had expected. Thousands of dollars. Maybe enough to cover several months of rent. Enough to pay every overdue bill sitting on her kitchen table. Enough to let her daughter join that school trip without worrying about the cost. For a brief second, the noise of the parking lot seemed to disappear. Emily stared at the money while 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. No one had seen her pick it up. No one knew it was in her hands. Life had not been kind lately. Maybe this was the break she desperately needed. Maybe fate was finally giving something back. Then she noticed a driver's license tucked behind several premium credit cards. The photo showed a distinguished man in his mid-40s. The name printed beneath the picture read Daniel Harrison. Emily swallowed hard. She looked again at the cash, then at the license. The choice seemed simple and impossible at the same time. As she stood alone beneath the glow of the parking lot lights, holding a fortune that could solve nearly every problem she faced, she had no idea that the decision she was about to make would change her life forever. Emily remained motionless for several seconds, staring at the wallet in her hands while cold evening air drifted across the parking lot. The money seemed to pull her in one direction while her conscience pulled her in another. She thought about her daughter, Sophie, sitting at home waiting for dinner. She thought about the overdue rent notice folded inside a kitchen drawer. She thought about the growing stack of bills she had been avoiding for weeks. Then she slowly closed the wallet. The decision did not make her feel relieved. If anything, it made her feel nervous. Returning the wallet meant returning the possibility of solving so many problems at once. Still, she could not convince herself to keep something that belonged to someone else. Sitting inside her car, she searched online using the name on the driver's license. Daniel Harrison was not difficult to find. Several articles appeared immediately. He was the founder of a successful technology company and one of the wealthiest businessmen in the state. Emily leaned back in her seat and sighed. The irony was impossible to ignore. The money inside that wallet might not even be noticed by a billionaire, yet it could completely transform her life. For a brief moment, she wondered whether someone like Daniel Harrison would even care if a few $1,000s disappeared. But she pushed the thought away. Right and wrong did not change based on how much money someone had. After finding a public business number connected to his company, she made the call. The receptionist sounded surprised when Emily explained the situation. After placing her on hold for several minutes, the woman returned and asked for Emily's phone number. Less than 20 minutes later, her phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and direct. The man introduced himself as Daniel Harrison. He confirmed several details about the wallet and asked where they could meet. 45 minutes later, a black SUV pulled into the nearly empty parking lot where Emily had agreed to wait. Daniel stepped out wearing a dark overcoat. He looked exactly like the photographs online. Confident, polished, and successful. Emily handed him the wallet. Daniel opened it immediately and inspected the contents. He counted nothing. He simply looked through it carefully before closing it again. "Everything appears to be here," he said. Emily nodded. "I did not take anything." "I can see that." For a moment she expected him to say more. Perhaps offer a reward. Perhaps ask about her situation. Instead, he reached into his pocket, removed a business card, and handed it to her. "Thank you for returning it." Emily accepted the card. "Of course." Daniel gave a brief nod, turned around, and walked back toward his vehicle. That was it. No emotional speech. No large reward. No dramatic moment. Within seconds, the SUV pulled away and disappeared into the night. Emily stood alone in the parking lot, feeling strangely empty. She was not angry. She had not returned the wallet expecting payment. Yet she could not deny a small sense of disappointment. Her life remained exactly the same as it had been an hour earlier. The bills still existed. The rent was still due. The struggles were still waiting for her at home. As she climbed back into her car and started the engine, she had no way of knowing that Daniel Harrison was thinking about her long after their brief meeting had ended. The next morning began like most mornings in Emily Carter's life, with an alarm clock ringing before sunrise and a long list of responsibilities waiting for her. She prepared breakfast for Sophie, helped her get ready for school, and quietly reassured her daughter that everything was going to be fine, even though she was not entirely sure it was true. By 7 o'clock, Emily was already driving toward the diner where she had worked for nearly 4 years. The familiar route usually brought a sense of routine, but that morning she could not stop thinking about the wallet. Not because she regretted returning it, but because the encounter felt strangely unfinished. Daniel Harrison had seemed polite enough, yet distant. It was as if she had been a minor interruption in an otherwise busy day. By the time she arrived at work, she pushed the thought aside and focused on what needed to be done. The lunch rush was unusually slow, and the mood inside the diner felt tense. Several employees exchanged worried looks throughout the morning. Around noon, the manager asked Emily to step into the office. The moment she walked through the door, she sensed something was wrong. Her manager looked uncomfortable. He avoided eye contact for several seconds before finally speaking. Business had been declining for months. The owners were cutting costs. Several positions were being eliminated. Emily listened quietly, hoping she had misunderstood. Then the words became impossible to ignore. Her position was one of those being eliminated. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. She asked a few practical questions, signed paperwork she barely processed, and walked out carrying a small box containing personal items from her locker. The entire conversation lasted less than 15 minutes. For years of loyalty had ended before lunch. Outside, Emily sat in her car gripping the steering wheel. Her rent was due in 3 days. Her savings were nearly gone. Health insurance would soon disappear. She wanted to cry, but instead she stared through the windshield and tried to think. Sophie would be coming home from school expecting the same reassuring mother she always knew. Emily could not let her daughter see panic. After spending nearly an hour searching job listings on her phone, she drove home. That evening, she filled out applications for restaurants, retail stores, and customer service positions. Most openings offered fewer hours and lower pay than her previous job. As the sun disappeared beyond the neighborhood rooftops, another worry arrived. Her landlord called. The conversation was polite but direct. Rent could not be delayed much longer. Emily promised she would find a solution. After hanging up, she sat quietly at the kitchen table while Sophie worked on homework nearby. Looking at her daughter, Emily forced a smile and asked about school. Sophie happily described a science project and a field trip she was excited about. Emily listened carefully, hiding the fear growing inside her. Later that night, after Sophie had fallen asleep, Emily opened her laptop and continued searching for work. Near midnight, an unfamiliar email appeared in her inbox. The sender's name was not one she recognized. The message was surprisingly short. It contained only one sentence. "Do not give up, Ms. Carter. Someone has noticed." Emily stared at the screen, wondering who could possibly have sent it. Emily read the email 3 times before finally closing her laptop. The sender address contained only a random string of letters and numbers, offering no clue about who had written it. Part of her assumed it was some kind of mistake, but the timing felt too strange to ignore. Just hours after losing her job, a message arrived from someone who seemed to know exactly what she was going through. Still, there was nothing she could do about it that night. The next morning, she focused on what mattered most. She dropped Sophie off at school and spent the day visiting businesses across Columbus, handing out resumes and asking about openings. Most managers were polite. Some promised to call. Others barely glanced at her application. By late afternoon, her feet ached and her optimism was fading. On the drive home, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Emily almost ignored it, but answered at the last second. A professional voice introduced himself as Michael Reynolds. He explained that he worked for a consulting firm and had come across her resume through a local employment network. Emily frowned. She had never heard of the company. Michael asked if she would be available for a meeting the following day regarding a potential administrative position. The salary he mentioned immediately caught her attention. It was significantly higher than anything she had earned at the diner. Assuming it was too good to be true, she asked several questions. Michael answered calmly and professionally. By the end of the call, she agreed to meet him. The next afternoon, Emily arrived at a modern office building downtown. The company name displayed in the lobby matched the one Michael had given her. Everything appeared legitimate. After checking in, she was escorted to a conference room overlooking the city skyline. A few minutes later, Michael entered. He appeared to be in his early 50s, neatly dressed, with an easygoing manner that immediately put her at ease. They spent nearly an hour discussing her work history, organizational skills, and experience dealing with customers. Unlike many interviews she had attended, Michael seemed genuinely interested in her answers. Several times he asked questions that felt surprisingly personal. How did she handle pressure? What motivated her during difficult periods? What values did she hope to teach her daughter? Emily answered honestly. She had nothing to hide. When the meeting ended, Michael thanked her for coming and promised that someone would contact her soon. As she gathered her things, curiosity finally got the better of her. "Can I ask something?" she said. Michael smiled. "Of course. How did you actually find my resume?" For the first time during the interview, he hesitated. It lasted only a second, but Emily noticed. "You came highly recommended," he replied. "By who?" Michael's smile returned, but this time it revealed nothing. "I am afraid I cannot answer that." Emily left the building more confused than before. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, she glanced up at the towering glass structure behind her. Somewhere above, from an office window she could not see, someone was quietly watching her departure and wondering whether she would eventually discover the truth. Over the next several days, strange things continued to happen around Emily Carter. None of them were dramatic enough to completely change her circumstances, yet together they formed a pattern she could not ignore. 2 days after her interview with Michael Reynolds, she received a call from the utility company. Expecting another reminder about an upcoming payment, she prepared herself for bad news. Instead, the representative informed her that an anonymous customer assistance credit had been applied to her account, reducing the balance significantly. Emily was stunned. She asked who had provided the credit, but company policy prevented the representative from revealing the donor's identity. The mystery deepened. The following morning, Sophie came home from school carrying exciting news. The field trip Emily had been worried about for weeks was suddenly covered through a special scholarship fund established by a local sponsor. Sophie happily described how several students had received assistance. Emily smiled and celebrated with her daughter, but privately, she could not stop wondering whether this was another coincidence. That evening, while searching job listings online, she received an email from a business owner offering a temporary part-time position. The owner explained that someone had recommended her work ethic and customer service skills. Once again, there was no explanation regarding who had provided the recommendation. Emily accepted the temporary work immediately. The income was not enough to solve all her problems, but it would help. As the days passed, she found herself thinking more often about Daniel Harrison. The billionaire had thanked her politely and disappeared from her life. At least that was what she had assumed. Yet the timing of these unexpected opportunities seemed impossible to dismiss. One Saturday afternoon, while working her temporary job at a small office supply store, Emily noticed an elderly customer struggling to carry several heavy boxes to his vehicle. Without hesitation, she left the counter for a moment and helped him load everything into his trunk. The man thanked her repeatedly. It was a simple act of kindness, the kind of thing Emily had always done without expecting recognition. Later that evening, as she closed the store, her manager approached with surprising news. A customer had called specifically to compliment her professionalism and helpful attitude. The praise had impressed the owner enough that they wanted to offer her additional hours. Driving home that night, Emily began to realize something important. Whether these opportunities were connected or not, they all stemmed from the same principle. People noticed character. They noticed integrity. They noticed how someone behaved when nobody was watching. Meanwhile, several miles away, Daniel Harrison sat alone in his office reviewing a report that had been delivered earlier that afternoon. The report contained information about Emily's recent actions, her work history, and the challenges she faced as a single mother. He read every page carefully. More than once, he paused to reflect on what he was learning. The woman who had returned his wallet was exactly who she had appeared to be: honest, resilient, consistent. Yet one detail near the end of the report captured his attention more than anything else. After reading it, Daniel slowly leaned back in his chair and stared out the window. For the first time since losing his wallet, he made a decision that would soon bring Emily closer to him than either of them could have imagined. The detail that captured Daniel Harrison's attention was not related to Emily's finances, employment history, or personal struggles. It was a note included near the end of the report describing how she spent nearly every Saturday morning volunteering at a small community reading program for children. There was no publicity attached to it, no tax benefit, no social media posts, no recognition. She simply showed up, helped children improve their reading skills, and went home. Daniel read that section twice. Over the years, he had met countless people who claimed to care about others, especially when cameras were present or opportunities existed to gain something in return. Emily seemed different. The more he learned about her, the harder it became to explain her actions through self-interest. Meanwhile, Emily remained completely unaware of the attention she was receiving. Life continued to demand everything she had. She balanced her temporary job applications, household responsibilities, and caring for Sophie. Although several small blessings had appeared recently, her situation was still fragile. One unexpected expense could undo all the progress she had made. A week later, Emily received another call from Michael Reynolds. He explained that a second interview had been scheduled for a position involving administrative support and client relations. The salary was even higher than previously discussed. Emily almost laughed from disbelief. Opportunities like this rarely appeared in her life. Determined not to waste the chance, she spent hours preparing. The interview took place at a different office building, one far more impressive than the first. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown Columbus, and every detail reflected success. During the meeting, several executives asked questions about leadership, communication, and problem-solving. Emily answered honestly, drawing from years of balancing work, parenting, and financial pressure. She did not try to sound impressive. She simply told the truth. Afterward, one executive asked a question she had not expected. "What is the most valuable thing you own?" Emily paused. The obvious answer would have been her car or the few savings she still had. Instead, she smiled softly. "Trust," she said. The room grew quiet. People can lose money and earn it back. They can lose jobs and find new ones. But when trust disappears, everything becomes harder. Several people exchanged glances. Emily could not understand why her answers seemed to affect them so strongly. Later that evening, she returned home exhausted. Sophie greeted her at the door holding a drawing she had made at school. The picture showed the two of them standing beside a small house under a bright blue sky. Above their heads, Sophie had written a simple sentence in colorful letters: "We always find a way." Emily hugged her daughter tightly. At that exact moment, in a private conference room across the city, Daniel Harrison was reviewing feedback from everyone who had met Emily. Every comment was remarkably similar: honest, dependable, compassionate, genuine. Daniel slowly closed the folder and looked toward the window. For years, he had struggled with disappointment after being betrayed by people he once trusted. Yet Emily's character challenged many assumptions he had developed. Then his phone rang. After listening for less than a minute, he stood up immediately. The news he received changed everything. For the first time since finding out about Emily, Daniel decided it was finally time to meet her again, but under circumstances neither of them had anticipated. The phone call Daniel Harrison received concerned a charitable foundation connected to one of his companies. A large donor had recently withdrawn support from a scholarship initiative designed to help children from struggling families. The program was suddenly facing a significant funding gap. Under normal circumstances, Daniel would have instructed his team to resolve the issue and moved on to other responsibilities. This time was different. While reviewing the list of families affected by the potential cuts, one name immediately stood out: Sophie Carter. Daniel stared at the document for several moments. The coincidence felt almost impossible. The daughter of the woman who had returned his wallet was among the children who could lose access to educational opportunities if funding disappeared. Yet what affected him most was not the financial situation. It was learning that Emily had never applied for additional assistance despite qualifying for multiple programs. According to the records, she consistently declined special consideration unless it was absolutely necessary. That discovery stayed with him for days. Meanwhile, Emily received exciting news of her own. Michael Reynolds called once again and informed her that she had advanced to the final stage of consideration for the position. The opportunity felt almost unreal. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a future without constant financial anxiety. She pictured paying rent on time, building savings, giving Sophie opportunities she had always wanted to provide. But just as hope began to grow stronger, another challenge appeared. A local nonprofit organization contacted Emily regarding a community support grant. Because of her recent job loss and financial situation, she qualified for emergency assistance. The representative explained that the grant could cover several months of expenses. Emily listened carefully and thanked them for the offer. Then she surprised everyone by declining. The representative seemed confused. Emily explained that while her situation was difficult, there were families facing even greater hardships. She still had temporary work. She still had a roof over her head. She wanted the resources directed toward someone with no alternatives. After ending the call, she thought little of the decision. To Emily, it simply felt right. What she did not know was that the conversation had been carefully documented. The nonprofit organization happened to partner with one of Daniel Harrison's foundations. A summary of the call eventually reached his desk. Daniel read every word. Then he read it again. Most people in difficult situations accepted help immediately. There was nothing wrong with that. Yet Emily had chosen differently. She had placed the needs of strangers ahead of her own comfort. Daniel found himself struggling to understand how someone under so much pressure could continue making choices based on principle rather than self-interest. A few days later, Michael invited Emily to attend what he described as a final evaluation event at a downtown conference center. Several candidates would participate. Emily spent the evening preparing, unaware that the event had a purpose far greater than an ordinary job interview. Across the city, Daniel reviewed final arrangements personally. For weeks he had observed Emily from a distance. Soon, that would change. The next meeting would reveal truths that neither of them could avoid any longer. The conference center was larger than any place Emily Carter had ever visited for a job opportunity. Glass walls reflected the morning sunlight across polished floors, and dozens of professionals moved through the building carrying folders and laptops. As she checked in, she noticed several other candidates. Waiting nearby, everyone appeared confident and experienced. For a moment, self-doubt returned. Emily reminded herself that she had earned her place there and walked inside. The event began with a series of group discussions and problem-solving exercises. Throughout the morning, participants were asked to address realistic workplace challenges, communicate with teammates, and present solutions. Emily focused on being herself. She listened carefully, treated others respectfully, and spoke honestly when her perspective could help. More than once, she found herself encouraging nervous participants who seemed intimidated by the setting. By lunchtime, she felt surprisingly comfortable. Then everything changed. The afternoon session took place in a large auditorium. As candidates took their seats, a host stepped onto the stage and welcomed everyone. Several company executives were introduced. Emily recognized some faces from previous interviews. Then the host announced a special guest. The moment Daniel Harrison walked onto the stage, Emily felt her heart skip. She immediately recognized him. The billionaire she had met weeks earlier after returning the wallet stood before the audience as if this were perfectly normal. For several seconds, she simply stared. Daniel began speaking about leadership, integrity, and trust. His words seemed directed toward the entire room. Yet Emily could not shake the feeling that parts of the speech carried a more personal meaning. Near the end of his presentation, Daniel paused and looked toward the audience. Many people believe character is revealed when life is easy, he said. I have learned the opposite. Character is revealed when doing the right thing comes at a personal cost. Emily felt her chest tighten. Then Daniel surprised everyone. He invited her by name to join him on stage. Confused and nervous, she slowly walked forward as hundreds of eyes followed her. When she reached the stage, Daniel smiled politely. Ms. Carter, he said, do you remember our meeting in the supermarket parking lot? A ripple of curiosity spread through the audience. Emily nodded. Daniel turned toward the crowd. He explained how he had lost his wallet containing cash, credit cards, and personal information. He described how a struggling single mother had found it and returned every dollar despite facing financial difficulties of her own. The room fell silent. Emily felt overwhelmed. She had never expected anyone to know that story. Then Daniel revealed something even more surprising. The mysterious opportunities, interviews, recommendations, and assistance had all originated from people connected to him. Not because he wanted to reward a single good deed, but because he wanted to understand whether that honesty represented who Emily truly was. According to Daniel, every report had confirmed the same conclusion. Her integrity was real. Her kindness was consistent. Her values remained unchanged even during hardship. Emily stood speechless as the truth finally came into focus. Yet Daniel was not finished. Looking directly at her, he reached for a folder resting on the podium and prepared to reveal the final reason she had been invited there that day. Daniel Harrison opened the folder and handed it to Emily. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked down at the documents inside. For a moment, the words did not fully register. Then she saw the job title, the salary, the benefits package, and the signature waiting at the bottom of the page. It was a formal offer of employment. The position was not temporary. It was not an internship or an entry-level opportunity. It was a full-time role within one of Daniel's companies, complete with professional training, career development support, health benefits, and a salary that exceeded anything Emily had ever earned. The audience erupted into applause, but Emily could barely hear it. She looked up at Daniel, overwhelmed by disbelief. Why? She asked quietly. Daniel smiled. Because skills can be taught. Experience can be gained. Character is much harder to find. The room grew silent again. Daniel then shared something he had never intended to discuss publicly. Years earlier, he had trusted people who cared more about his wealth than his values. Business partners had disappointed him. Friends had disappeared when circumstances changed. Even some people closest to him had broken his trust. Over time, he had become skeptical. Successful, but skeptical. Then a woman struggling to pay rent found a wallet filled with enough money to solve many of her problems and returned it without taking a single dollar. That wallet contained cash, Daniel said, looking toward the audience. But what she returned to me was something far more valuable. She returned a little of my faith in people. Emily felt tears fill her eyes. Not because of the job offer, but because someone had finally recognized the countless choices she made every day when nobody was watching. The sacrifices, the honesty, the determination to raise her daughter with integrity despite every obstacle. Daniel was still not finished. He revealed that his foundation would fully fund Sophie's educational scholarship through high school and provide access to enrichment programs that would help her pursue any academic path she chose in the future. At that moment, Emily covered her mouth in shock. The thought of Sophie's future had kept her awake on countless nights. Now, opportunities she could never have afforded were suddenly within reach. 1 year later, life looked very different. Emily had excelled in her new role and earned the respect of her colleagues. She no longer worried about missing rent payments. Sophie was thriving in school, exploring new interests, and dreaming bigger than ever before. Yet despite all the changes, Emily remained the same person she had always been. She continued volunteering at the reading program. She continued helping others whenever she could. She never forgot where she came from. One afternoon, after attending a community event together, Daniel and Emily stood outside watching children play in a nearby park. The conversation turned to the day they first met. Daniel laughed softly and shook his head. You know, he said, everyone thinks the most important thing I lost that day was a wallet. Emily smiled. It was not. Daniel looked toward the families gathered in the distance. No. The most important thing I almost lost was my belief that people still do the right thing when nobody is watching. For a moment, Neither of them spoke. They did not need to. Sometimes a single honest decision creates a chain of events nobody could predict. And sometimes the greatest rewards are not the ones people seek, but the ones that arrive because they chose integrity when it would have been easier not to.